Our next speaker today is Brian Heath. He is Senior Vice President and Global Head of Commercial for Kite, a Gilead company, and an innovator sponsor of today's conference. So, Brian, come on up.
When you're 6'6", you have to adjust the microphone. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Heath. I'm the Global Head of Commercial for Kite. It's a Gilead company, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here with this community focused on growing biotech, and amazing to meet so many key players and bright minds. I'm thrilled today to share how Kite's journey and achievements exemplify a thriving bioscience ecosystem in LA, and how our collective efforts are driving innovation and progress in the region. So at Kite, our mission is to achieve cures through cell therapy. And this mission, I believe, aligns very closely with the mission of LABEST and also the broader LA biotech community. It's the concept and the mission to develop groundbreaking therapies and treatments right here in Los Angeles that can benefit patients globally. Now, our focus on innovation and patient care is a testament to the promise and the potential of the LA bioscience ecosystem. Kite isn't just based in the LA area. We were born here, and I'm hardly the person to share the history of Kite. There are many here that could tell that story much better than me, but needless to say, it was born from the institutions right here in Los Angeles. The original scientific advisory board included many physician scientists from UCLA. Both UCLA and City of Hope, of course, participated in our first Kite trial, which launched in 2015, and many clinical trials since have taken place right here. Being based in LA has provided us with numerous advantages, including proximity to LAX, access to a world-class healthcare ecosystem, and a pipeline of top talent from leading universities. And these factors have ultimately been critical to the growth and success of the company. Now, there's a moment when startups need to expand their focus on innovation and excellence towards innovation and relevance. And that moment for Kite was the realization that we need to manufacture these medicines at scale. And Kite, of course, built a world-class and global manufacturing capability. It's the largest dedicated in-house cell therapy manufacturing network in the world. But doing so does not mean that innovation stops. And so Kite has continued to innovate. And just last year, for example, Kite announced that it had reduced the median time to turn around cells for Yescarta, our primary cell therapy, by 2 days, which is a remarkable achievement when we know that every single day matters for a patient whose disease may be deteriorating quickly. Now, while Kite has a strong presence with strategic locations worldwide, our roots are firmly grounded in Santa Monica. And this global reach, combined with our local foundation, highlights the impact of LA-based innovation and what that can have on a global scale. And through this approach, Kite was able to achieve the most patient experience of any CAR T-cell therapy company, with over 29,000 patients treated through our clinical trials and commercial products. 2 commercial products on the market with 5 indications, widely available across the globe, and a global team of 4,000 people. Our research priorities reflect our commitment to expanding the impact of CAR T-cell therapy. We're advancing R&D in additional blood cancers, accelerating research in solid tumors, and broadening our efforts even beyond oncology. And these initiatives are driven by the innovative environment here in Los Angeles, and we're excited about the future possibilities. In fact, our next project is a strategic collaboration with Arcellx to co-develop and co-commercialize a late-stage clinical cell therapy in multiple myeloma, and we hope to launch that next year. So Kite's success is deeply intertwined in the LA bioscience community. We continue to benefit from LA's entrepreneurial spirit, our talented workforce, growing economy, global access, and leading medical institutions. And together, we can drive innovation and make significant strides in biotech. So I want to thank LABEST for your continued partnership and support in advancing innovation right here and from Los Angeles. And I look forward to engaging with all of you and exploring how we can collectively contribute to the growth and success of the LA biotech ecosystem. Now I'm honored to introduce the next segment, a special fireside chat about a CAR T patient's journey from pre-diagnosis to post-treatment. So please join me in welcoming the global head of Kite, Cindy Perettie, and a CAR T patient from UCLA, Laurie Adami. Their stories exemplify the real purpose and ambition of the LA biotech community. Cindy and Laurie, we're looking forward to hearing your discussion.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for this invite to LABEST. And similar to what you heard from other speakers, Kite is here today because of Arie Belldegrun. He founded the company. We have a lot of people in the audience today, like David Chang, who helped develop these important therapies in the early days. So thank you so much. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. I am excited to introduce Laurie. We have a chance now to talk about what it is that CAR T can do for a patient. We've been talking about innovation, and this is a game changer. These therapies are potentially curative for patients with blood cancer, and as you just heard from Brian, we're looking beyond that. So I'm looking forward to introducing Laurie and hearing your story.
Thanks, Cindy. Great to be here with all of you.
So maybe we could start off with, what was your life like before you were diagnosed with cancer?
When my life was normal, you mean? So, I moved out to California when I was 24 years old at the 1984, so you all know how old I am now. And I came out here to work for a startup software company. And 14 years later, when I was 38, I took over as president of the company when the founder retired. And that same year I got married. And then 2 years later, I was kind of an old mom. At the age of 40, I had my first and only son. So a good life, all in all, so far.
Yeah. No, great. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your diagnosis and then what you went on to for treatments and eventually to CAR T.
Sure. So I started to have health issues when my son was just in preschool. I would get regular sinus infections. I had an enlarged lymph node. I had very dry eyes. I'd been a long time contact lens wearer. And suddenly my eyes were so dry, I could not wear my contacts. I also felt something in my abdomen, and doctor said, oh, it's just a hernia from when you had your baby. I was roundly dismissed for 2-3 years. And, doctors would say, well, look at you. And I would say, I'm so tired. Doctors would say, well, I'm tired listening to your life. I was traveling a week to 2 weeks a month. My new parent company was based in London. So I was going to London regularly, as well as New York, 5 million miles on American Airlines, believe it or not.
This is how an executive handles cancer.
So doctors just said, I'm exhausted listening to you. So it was very difficult to get the right doctor to suddenly say, okay. And I finally found that doctor who sent me to get a scan of the hernia originally. Well, it was supposed to be a straightforward scan, no contrast. And suddenly this individual is walking in with these white bottles, which I'd never seen before. And they said the images weren't good enough. So I had to take this contrast so they could get clearer images. And I was diagnosed not long after with follicular non-Hodgkin lymphoma. I was stage 4. I was very symptomatic. And so I had to treat right away.
I can imagine that had to be scary. So you went through a number of treatments and then eventually you received CAR T therapy. Do you want to share a little bit about your experience with CAR T therapy?
Yeah.
The treatments prior?
The treatments prior, sure. So this was 19 years ago that I was diagnosed. And I was 46 years old at my diagnosis. And at the time, there was one approved treatment. And that was called R-CHOP. So a combination of monoclonal antibodies, 3 chemo agents, and prednisone. And I went through that treatment and, 6 cycles later, I had a scan and I was told I was in a complete remission. So what did I do? I went merrily back to work, to traveling, to running my life. My son was now in kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And I remember my oncologist, when I asked her if I could travel, she said, yeah, just wear a mask. So I was way ahead of the
Yes.
mask thing, right? And so I went merrily back to work. But what happened was at my first follow-up scan, I already had PET uptake in my lungs. So it was coming back. I had very strange presentation, extranodal presentation of my disease. And so we watched it coming back. And I was then pushed to do an auto transplant. And I went out to the factory of auto transplants, City of Hope, and was with the head of transplant at the time. But I didn't like the numbers for follicular. Over 50% would relapse within a year, particularly if they relapsed quickly after R-CHOP. And so and I also had a problem going into the hospital for a month because I had a little kid at home. And, I didn't have enough local support. My husband had his own business. So the head of transplant at City of Hope agreed to find me a trial. And I went on an HDAC inhibitor at that time. So this was 2008, 2009. And it was a pill. I actually felt worse on that pill than on the chemo. But I went on that for a year, and it bought me a year. And then the cancer started to come back again. By now, there were 2 new treatments. One was bendamustine, which had just gotten approved in the U.S. So I did that with the hopes that my disease would shrink. And I was now at my 3rd center for treatment in LA. Fortunately, I lived in LA, so I could get a lot of great care. And there was a relatively new therapy on the market, which was a radioimmunotherapy, which was called Bexar. And I knew a bunch of patients in the early trials, great success, and I thought, that's going to be my thing. So I had Bexar in December of 2010. Okay, that's my 4th treatment now. A couple months later, I was reading my coffee, or reading the paper and having my coffee, and I felt a giant tumor, and my 4th treatment had failed. So at that point, all 3 places I'd been treated previously said, the only thing left for you is an allogeneic stem cell transplant. I only had 2 siblings. My parents should have had 5 of us because every sibling has a 1 in 4 chance to be a match, and I only had 2 siblings. So I did not have a sibling donor for allo. I was also considered very heavily treated, so I was at greater risk for mortality, morbidity, and then you start looking at graft versus host disease. It wasn't great. So a friend said, Laurie, you have to find another trial. So I sent emails out to 8 researchers all over the world. I went to bed. I was so depressed. Here I am, relapsed again, and very little great.
I want to make a point that you are not the average patient in the sense that you did your homework. You were really reaching out to physicians around the globe to find the right option for you.
Right.
Fantastic.
Well, I realized early on that I had the most skin in the game. It was my son who was going to lose his mom.
Yep.
The doctors see their 20 patients. They go home. They have a life. It was me, and I had to do it. Now, I'm also kind of a type A. I ran a company. I'm a little bit of a control freak.
Which is good in this situation.
But I became my own, kind of expert. I found trials. I did research. So I sent out these emails to 8 researchers. I was so depressed, and I went to bed. I had to pick my son up that afternoon at school. And we were actually going to a Lymphoma Research Foundation fundraiser that night in LA. And anyway, I went to bed, and an hour later, my phone rang, and the caller ID said UCLA. And I hear this very heavily accented voice say, Miss Adami, this is Sven DeVos at UCLA, and I have a clinical trial. I read your pathology, I read your study, or your treatment history, and I have a PI3 kinase inhibitor in a phase 1 trial, and you need to come in today because I've only got 20 slots, and I've filled 19 already. And if you don't come in today, one of my associates is going to give away the spot. So I said, I can't come in today. I have to get my son at school, and then I have to go set up this fundraiser. And he says, by any chance, are you going to the lymphoma research fundraiser tonight? I said, yes, I am. He said, oh, great. I'll be there. So he brought the releases.
Oh, my goodness.
We sat on the couch with my son watching all of this, and I signed on to this PI3 kinase inhibitor, which is the time called Cal 101. And not long after I started on that treatment, Calistoga Pharmaceuticals was bought by Gilead. Okay, so I've now had my first Gilead treatment. And it was amazing because within a week, my tumors were shrinking on this oral treatment. And I ended up being the longest patient. I was what they call the long tail in the study. So as patients, as a function of time, would drop off, I was still there. And I was that last bar, almost 6 years out.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Now, a year into that trial, I attended an event that the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society hosted in LA, where they showed Emily Whitehead's film. And I heard about this thing called CAR-T for the first time ever and was blown away. And I was seeing Dr. DeVos that week for a study visit. And I walked into his office and I said, "Why aren't you telling me about this? Why can't I get CAR-T?" He said, "Laurie," he said, "come here, I want to show you something." He had since moved his office from Westwood to Santa Monica. So he takes me to the window. He says, "Look over there. You see those two big buildings over there? That's Kite Pharmaceutical. They are developing CAR-T, but they're not ready for follicular yet." And I had to wait 6 years to get follicular. And I said, "Well, how soon?" He said, "I don't know when the trials are going to come, but you're riding on this PI3 kinase inhibitor right now. We're going to ride that horse as long as it'll go. Then if you need to, we'll jump to something else," which eventually, after almost 6 years, the PI3 kinase inhibitor failed. But by then there was a new monoclonal antibody, obinutuzumab. So that was my sixth therapy. I did 10-month treatment of that. That got everything under control. And then immediately when I stopped that, ballooning tumors again.
So should we take a peek at what it looked like before you got CAR-T?
Yes, let's do that. Okay, so we can start with this.
Yeah, let's start with this.
So I was really in a race against time. And spring of 2018, I had been 5 months without treatment, 5 months. And my disease, it was growing so rapidly. We thought maybe I had transformed to a more aggressive lymphoma, but I was again rebiopsied. I still had the same old follicular, which I think was a blessing. I didn't have to deal with, transformation to more aggressive. But I was out hiking in the spring and Dr. DeVos called me. He said, "Laurie, we're opening a multi-center trial for the Yescarta product, which is the Kite product. There will be 5 patients at UCLA, and you will be patient number 1. And so we need to get you going." And, you think, well, God, I've been through 6 lines of treatment. Why is this going to be any better? But honestly, when I first learned about CAR-T and I said it had to be better. This is not a pill. This is not an infusion coming off a factory line or one size fits all. This is actually so much smarter. So I had so much hope, but I always had hope that it was going to be the one to work. Now, during this time, my son had gone from kindergarten through elementary, through middle, and he was getting ready to graduate high school in 2018. So we got all set up to start my CAR-T, and I went in. This is me on apheresis day. You can see how swollen my face was. I had tumors all over my head and neck, throughout my body. So we did the apheresis, which was incredibly easy. I had harvested stem cells way back in 2007, thinking I might have an auto transplant, but then we never used them. And that took me over a week to get those cells. Apheresis, CAR-T, piece of cake.
So extracting your T cells and your white blood cells.
That's right. That's right. And you have a dual line catheter. And then the Kite courier shows up to pick up my cells. And I said, "Okay, you're going to take," he was going down the 405, right? So I said, "You need to make sure that you lock the van door because I do not want my T cells ending up on the 405 freeway because then we'll have to start all over again." So, it was a really incredible process. And then here I am. So it was about 3 weeks between when I had my stem cell or my CAR-T, my T cells harvested to when I got them back. And
how long did the infusion take?
Oh my gosh, it was nothing, 15, 16 minutes. But you have a very strange thing that happens when you get the infusion. And a lot of researchers don't even know that. You get this really strong taste of creamed corn. And I even went to Kite and they said, "Really?" And it's the preservative. And I said, "Why can't you make it taste and smell like movie theater popcorn?" Because I don't know about you guys,
Work on
but
that.
yeah, cream corn, not so much. So the day of my infusion of my CAR T, it was July. I was getting it July 16th of 2018. So I go into the hospital the night before, Ronald Reagan, 6E. It's mostly a stem cell transplant floor for patients, and there was two of us that were getting CAR T. Another gentleman who had, I think, marginal zone, and then me. And he became known as the bear because he was not a very pleasant person. But I don't know what they called me. They never told me. So anyway, this is the day I got my cells back. And that's my husband. And I made up Zuma 5 t-shirts. I gave them out to all the staff, even the guy delivering my meals. And he comes in, he says, "Am I allowed to wear this?" I said, "I don't know. You better ask your boss. I don't want you to get fired." So this was when they pulled out my cells. That little tiny bag is my CAR T cells. And they told me there were about 1 billion cells in there. And honest to God, it looked like pond scum. I said, "Wait, my cells left and they were red, and they come back looking sort of gray, brown." They said, "Those are your CAR T cells." So they did the infusion, which was all of about 16 minutes. They give you Benadryl so you don't have any kind of reaction, which of course puts you to sleep. And then you wait to see what happens.
So maybe we'll look at a scan before you. So what is it that? So why don't you talk about what it looked like before you got CAR T?
So this was my baseline scan that was taken 1 week prior to my CAR T infusion. And this is pretty much the scan I had for 12 years. I would get stuff to reduce, but it never fully went away. And then it would start coming back. So when I went into CAR T, I had about 8 pounds of tumors.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And today, I wouldn't get CAR T looking like this. It would be considered way too risky because this kind of disease, I think there's a clear correlation, not always, but there's a pretty strong correlation with the the amount of side effects that you're going to have. So I had cancer. All that black is cancer in my head and neck and my bone marrow and my abdomen. I actually had my right kidney was blocked because one of my tumors was so big and it was sitting on my kidney that my kidney enzymes the numbers were all messed up. And I remember Dr. DeVos saying to me, if CAR T doesn't work right away, we're going to have to put a stent into you for your kidney because your kidney's going to fail. Mm-hmm.
So this is a week before you get CAR.
This is a week before.
Look at what happens after.
So just wait. So that night, I started to get tingling in all of my tumors. And it was really strange. It wasn't pain, but it was like something was happening. And I could feel my tumors, like especially in my head and neck, which were all palpable, shrinking. Within 2 days, my kidney enzymes were normal.
Wow.
And let's put up the after scan. So this is a month later. So August 15th. And remember, I got my cells July 16th. That's 1 month later.
After CAR T.
30 days, I rolled.
8 pounds of tumor.
Gone. So this is, I didn't believe it. And when my oncologist came in to tell me, I crumpled up the report. I threw it across the room. And I said, "I know you just typed this up in the back room. Why are you?" Because remember, I'd had 12 years of terrible scans, terrible news. Every time I had hope, it would get whacked down. So it took me a while to believe that it was true. And now this summer, July 16th, I will celebrate my 7th anniversary of being cancer-free after 12 years.
That is absolutely fantastic. And thank you for being willing to share these scans, because I think it tells the story of what the impact can be of a therapy like this. Maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the barriers or challenges that go along with CAR T.
Right. So I was very lucky. I was in LA. So I had access to great specialists that knew about all these new treatments coming along. But that's not the case for most Americans. A lot of patients are rural. A lot of patients are treated at, community oncologists where they may have a general oncologist. So they don't hear about these treatments because for 50 years, doctors, oncologists have been doing chemo, autotransplant, chemo, allotransplant since the mid-70s. So this is what they know. Unless you're a specialist, you really don't have access to, or unless you're seeing a specialist, you really don't have access to the people that are going to be skilled enough to get you through this. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is awareness. There's a true lack of awareness in our country of this incredible technology. I happened to come across it because I saw Emily Whitehead's film, and there was a lot of press around Emily Whitehead. But then, of course, COVID happened and sucked all the air out of the room, and there was very little done to raise awareness. And even today, I tell people I had CAR T, and they say, "Oh, did you go to Mexico to get that?" I said, "No." So I think the industry, Cindy, has done a terrible job raising awareness. I mean, look at what I went through for 12 years. And as my 7th line of treatment, I get this. But we're, of course, competitive with one another. So there's this focus on, outperforming each other and pleasing the shareholders. But there needs to come together some sort of a public relations awareness. I'm a one-person PR machine.
No, I think you've raised a huge point, and you'll be thrilled to hear that industry's coming together, and there's going to be a CAR T report coming out of ASCO this year. So it's really important that all of the stakeholders are out there educating, not just industry, not just physicians, not just advocacy, but everybody doing it together. You've raised a huge point.
Right. And if patients, if the greater public is aware of these incredible treatments, they're going to ask their doctors about it. And if the doctor can't respond, that person's going to go elsewhere.
Why don't you share about what you do in your free time around that when patients have questions?
Yep. So people said to me after I got through this 12-year journey, "Are you going to go back to running your company?" And I could have, but to me, it just really didn't have a lot of attraction. And I remember coming out of the hospital saying to my husband, "What am I going to do with my time?" He said, "You're going to raise awareness, and you're going to help other patients get to this sort of treatment, and you're going to guide them." So I am a volunteer patient advocate for a number of different nonprofits. So I spend about 20 hours a week speaking to patients who have just been diagnosed, and it's like a bomb has just gone off in their head. They don't know what the heck to do. So I help those patients. I also talk to a lot of patients that are looking at getting CAR T, and I'm supporting patients with all kinds of lymphoma, leukemia, as well as multiple myeloma. Now, when you talk about access, multiple myeloma, you still have to have had 3 treatments before you can get CAR T as your 4th. For follicular, which is what I had, it's still approved only as 3rd, even though follicular has the best outcomes with CAR T of any of the trials that have been done to date. In my trial, 95% response rate, and complete remission over 80, close to 70%. Long-term follow-ups haven't required any further treatment. There's nothing like it in the market. So I do a lot of that, helping other patients as a volunteer. I also advocate in Washington and in Sacramento to get legislative change to benefit cancer patients, either through working on, crummy insurance and how to fix that, expanding trials and how more trials will be available in places beyond academic settings. I was just in Sacramento a couple of weeks ago testifying about a new bill to enhance some really terrible provisions that are part of Medicare Advantage. So I do a lot of that. I speak a lot at conferences, at companies. I've had the pleasure of visiting almost all of Kite's facilities. And, it's interesting. People say, "Oh, that's so great. You can see how everything was done." But Sydney, the reason I want to go in there is to thank the employees.
No, and I know our employee base, all 4,000 of it, appreciate you coming in and talking with us. And it's also a great opportunity for you to see, where were your cells made?
Right.
What did it look like? Well, do you want to share a little bit about what you're doing now beyond all of she's single-handedly a patient advocate for so many, and she's underscored the work that she has done, which is just tremendous, I think, with both policy and supporting other patients. What are the other things that you like to do post-CAR?
Well, after CAR T, I was supposed to be going to the Everest Base Camp with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society to raise money for more immunotherapy research. And a team of my oncologists from UCLA, my mothership, were going, my trial coordinator, and we were all set to go. And then COVID shut the world down. So I'd been on this mission of training to get ready to go. But I've still made it a big part of my life to try to be as well as I can be physically. So I'm very active. I do a lot of hiking. I hiked Mount Washington not that long ago, which was actually surprisingly difficult compared to California hiking because it's just boulders. And the altitude's not bad, but you're literally climbing up boulders. So I have a lot of physical things that I do. I'm in the process of writing a book, a memoir, and I've written about 35,000 words. And I don't know anything about the publishing business, so I'm going to self-publish. But really as a way, if I can help one other patient in their journey, because, none of us expects to get cancer. Like I could say to the audience, how many of you think you're going to get cancer in your lifetime? Do I see any hands going up? No. And the reality is probably about 40% of the audience is going to, in their lifetime, be faced with some type of cancer. And when you get that diagnosis, you have not got a clue what to do. You don't know who to talk to. You don't know where to go. You just think all the worst thoughts possible. So
Yeah, no, I just want to say we're grateful for how much you have given back post your cancer journey and just getting to know you over the last couple of years and recognizing the trajectory of your life, what it's been like for you personally with your family, what it's been like for you professionally, and how much energy you bring to giving back to patients is absolutely extraordinary. I want to give her at least a round of applause for all that you have done.
Well, and I have to thank all of you in this audience, because without all of you doing the work you're doing, and without Ari getting going with Kite, at UCLA, and the timing was phenomenal. If you had waited a year, I would have been dead. So the way it all worked out, and Kite and all the work Kite is doing on behalf of so many patients, I just have endless gratitude. And, there's so much nastiness in the world. And sometimes I'll talk to patients and they'll say, well, why are you doing this? Like they don't trust that I'm just really trying to help them. And it's really a sad commentary, on the world today that patients might suspect me. Well, should I give her my cell phone number? What is she? And I say, no, I do this because I was the beneficiary of someone on the road ahead of me who taught me about clinical trials, finding experts. I had 7 lines of treatment in 12 years, and 3 of them were clinical trials. And they were the best. They were the most targeted. You look at the results of some of the junk I did, the 4 approved, the results are terrible. And you look at Yescarta for follicular, there's never been anything like it. So,
well, thank you so much for joining us today, telling your story. I hope you're all equally inspired. Ari, would you like to say a few things?
Amazing story. But in the room now, there is a guy called Zach Roberts who wrote the clinical trial and got the approval by the FDA to start the trial so you can be one of the first ones. Zach, where are you? He's now with Allogene.
It's a pleasure to see you. It's one of the first things that I did while I was at Kite was to write the Zuma 5 study. So it's always a pleasure to meet patients who have benefited from that work.
Oh, well, thank you. It's people.
No, I saw that T-shirt and I need one.
Oh, yeah, I will get you one. I gave you one, Ari, right? Do you ever wear it? Or is it framed?
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, and have a great conference.